Hey, welcome to our Parent Information Night, the EdTech series. Tonight we are presenting on how to help your children to plan and prepare for the CASP testing that's going to be coming up. So a couple of reminders. We are recording this right now. Sorry about that. And we are going to be, you can change the language the closed caption in the Meet to whatever language you need it, or whatever language Google allows. Sergio is pasting that link or that information in the chat, and so that's something that you have as an option as well. So Janae, who is the Director of Curriculum for Instruction and Assessment, she's not here right now, but I'm Steve Harmon. I'm one of the specialists from the district, but I focus mostly on the Burnell Learning Community. So that's Burnell Intermediate School and the feeding elementary schools into that.
I got to toggle off that microphone there, on or off. Yeah, my name is Bruce Neff. I'm also an EdTech specialist in the district here. My primary community that I support is the Davis Learning Community. I've been in the Oak Grove School District for 21 years. Began my career here teaching fourth grade at Santa Teresa Elementary, taught there for approximately 10 years. And now I'm and been at the district office in this role for the past 11, I guess maybe about 12 years now. And I'll pass it off to Sergio.
Hi, I'm Sergio Rizzi. I'm also an EdTech specialist with Oak Grove School District. I support the Herman Learning Community and the so Herman Intermediate School and all of the elementary schools that feed into Herman. Like Bruce, I also started in the classroom here at Oak Grove School District. I taught 10 years at Oak Ridge Elementary School, and then this will be my 8th year as an ed tech at the district office. So 18 years with the district so far.
Yeah, I guess I didn't share that. I was in the classroom for 13 years, mostly at Davis Intermediate School, and yeah, before I came to this position now. All right. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
All right. So for tonight, our task is to help parents, families understand what the CASP testing entails and to provide tips and strategies to develop conditions at home for students to show their best when they are testing at school. So in the upcoming slides, you're going to see some acronyms that might come up. We'll explain what those acronyms mean. Those might be terms that your students come home to talk to you about, or maybe you'll be receiving flyers about them. So hopefully this will help engage conversation, whether it be at the dinner table or just in preparation for what state testing means and how to engage your child at home with, you know, the importance of that and what process it serves. Along with some useful links, practice resources, websites, and some other information that could help in the time coming up to the test. Next slide.
Yeah, we'll move on. So yeah, just a reminder as we transition to this next slide for those of you that just came on board here. And first off, welcome for coming to the EdTech series specifically for the CASP testing. We are using the Google Meet for this. It's being recorded and it will be uploaded to the district's webpage later, so you can access it later if you let somebody else know. You get some fantastic information from us tonight, or just feel free to share that with whomever. Additionally, you will see how to turn on closed captions if you would like to be able to see the words come across the screen. And more importantly, if English is not your home language and we like to translate it into the variety of languages that Google supports, it will translate the language live during this presentation as well. We're sorry about all the beeping noise. I'm not sure if you're hearing that, but it's all the people who are admitting to this as well. If you have any questions as this is going on, please feel free to go ahead and jump into the chat, which is in the bottom right-hand corner. It looks like a little speaking icon, or add it into the question and answer area, and we will pause periodically to address those. At the end, we will have time for more open-ended questions if we don't happen to cover a topic that you would like us to cover as well. We'll try that to the best of our knowledge. So moving on as well here, so CAS testing in 2023. As you're aware, when we had distance learning a few years back, we also didn't have testing at that time. Our first year of testing did begin last year, and that was an adjustment for some people. First time they'd seen the test, and they were actually perhaps fourth graders at that time. So similarities in regards to kind of getting used to that process again. The tests, there are some very slight modifications that I will discuss to address some of that as well. But for the most part, we're back into the process of taking the state test in the way that it is intended. So there are many acronyms that come across that kind of like try to explain or shorten up these long things. This is just the thing with education in general. We use acronyms for just about everything. So the CASP, or the California's, so sorry, maybe I'll start off with like SBAC is the form of tests that we use here in our nation. There's two different varieties, and we use the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. It's the version that we use in California. It is in our district going to be given to students who are in 3rd through 8th grade. There's also the CAST is something you may hear as well. If your child is in 5th or 8th grade, that is the California Science Test. They will be doing that in addition to, it's a separate test, but in addition to the normal test they would take for English, language arts, and mathematics. You also have something that's called the CSA, which is the California Spanish Assessment. This is an assessment that is given to students who are in a dual language program. In our district, we have 3 schools that have students that are in these types of programs. Christopher Elementary is one, Del Roble Tweeby is one, and Edenville has a dual language class. That CSA at the California Spanish Assessment will be provided to the students that are in grades, I believe, 3 through 8. And except for at Christopher, I believe they are not providing the CSA or Spanish assessment for 5th graders, because the 5th graders only at Christopher, they've decided they are taking the state test. However, if your child attends either Del Roble or Edenville, it is my understanding that they will be doing the science test as well as the Spanish assessment. That's my current knowledge from ESD department. Let's see. So school sites will be communicating their specific testing schedule. So as you see on the slide, it says the window opened on March 8th and it ends on June 14th. This is the opportunity that any school district in the state of California can use to administer this test. It's very rare that you see districts that are already beginning testing, because March is that's pretty fast. And in my experiences when I was teaching, I'm sure that Steve and Sergio can speak towards this, like you have a lot of content you have to get through. And if we had our way, we'd probably do it in the last 2 weeks of school. But there's kind of that balance that you have to cover, because last 2 weeks of school, you get the summer blues and everybody's wanting to not necessarily focus. It's constantly striking that balance of when do you actually want to give the test where the kids have as much content as possible already provided to them, as well as not being anxious to not necessarily want to do the test. So that's my experiences in the classroom that I've seen, which leads me to the other piece of this, another acronym that's very important, which is called a CAT. The way that this test is done, it's called a computer adaptive test. So what that does, it does a couple of things. It allows the student, first off, it identifies the students, their grade level, and it's able to, based on, since I'll use 4th grade sort of as my analogy here, because I had the most experience. So it knows that according to the California state standards, if say the student begins their test on April 7th, it knows based on that window approximately the groundwork that should have been covered, but the content in that class. And so it will help kind of like adapt things in that regard to the types of things that they may be exposed to. It's not perfect because of the fact that different teachers will address different standards at different times of the year, because you have your scope, which is everything you need to cover, and the sequence is when you, the teacher, is deciding to work on those standards. But another thing that the computer adaptive test will also do is when a student is taking the test, And if they get the correct answer on a question, it will move them through a question that is perhaps a little bit more challenging. Or if they answer those questions incorrectly, it will adapt to that and give a question that is less challenging. And this is how you can get that range of abilities in the different areas that address the standards. When you get the scores to see where your child places, this is how it kind of knows, is that it moves them up and down where the computer uses the technology to help kind of figure out and target where their levels are at. So that's the CAT, or computer adaptive kind of part of it. When they take the test, and later on we're going to actually be able to, we're going to show you a demonstration, or there are some links later on this slide where you can, at home, sit down with the child, go through a practice test to get a visualization on what this may look like, what it may look like exactly in the classroom, give you sample questions specific to the grade level. But what the key thing to kind of think of for the state test, there's basically two major components of, well, there's English language arts and there's mathematics. But within ELA, let's say, you have two types of things you're going to do. You're going to be answering your questions, kind of multiple choice questions, kind of short traditional tests, and that's where the computer adaptive tests will kind of bounce around, make them a little more challenging, perhaps moving it less challenging as they progress through them. Those series of questions is shortened again for this year. Pre-distance learning, there were more questions in that assessment. Now that bank is slightly shorter. And then the other major component, the other piece, is what's called the performance task. Traditionally, the performance task is probably a little bit more challenging for students, because what that entails in language arts, an example of that would be they may be given 2 or 3 articles, some sources of information. Might be a short story, maybe it's a nonfiction article, maybe it's some science related thing. They're given these articles or sources, and then they are asked to write about it. It will come in the form of 2 ways of doing this to demonstrate their knowledge of how they are comprehending that information and synthesizing it together. It might be in the form of a narrative, where they have to tell a story about that information they've received or that they've read. It might be an informational paper where they're talking like facts about what they have read and seen in the performance task. Or the third might be an opinion, where they have to convince somebody based on their writing about a position or a stance based again on those sources. The performance tasks are done over a few days, and those take a lot more time, kind of going back and revisiting those questions, whereas the multiple choice is more, and I'll demonstrate the multiple choice this evening, answering those questions, and then you just kind of move on to those as you go. In mathematics, in the math portion of the performance task, the more kind of meaty question, students will be presented with anywhere between 4 to 6 problems. These are kind of like real world types of problems, where they will use their words and numbers to explain the reasoning about a real world situation. So to give you an example of something they might see, might be Kelly needs to paint her room, and you need to describe in writing and demonstrating with, they give you an image of like the sizes of the walls and the windows. You might ask, how much paint does Kelly need to purchase, and what's the cost of it, and how many gallons of paint? Just for example, I'm just kind of making that up. But that's the idea of, they get the information and they need to write as well as solve the math problem. That's a performance task example, as opposed to multiple choice. Okay, getting back to, just so we're very clear on when exactly the dates are that your child at your respective school site will be taking the test. You will be receiving, if you have not done or heard already, from the principals at the schools, and the teachers will be communicating specifically to the parents through the normal channels of communication, which may be Parent Square, very common, or perhaps that weekly envelope and a paper. If you're uncertain, you can always call the school, and they will provide you with the information about when the testing times are occurring. But basically what we tend to see, and when I was teaching, is typically after the spring break, there's usually a week to kind of settle back in, and testing begins. That seems to be the pattern, but that is not a guarantee. when your child will be testing at your school. I think I covered most of the points here. I know a few questions came up. It looks like I'm going to guess that if we want to pause, Steve or Sergio, if there's anything verbally you wanted to discuss, since that is in chat and may not be translated for people, I did see a few questions.
Yeah, I can clarify one thing for those of you not able to see the chat or are maybe on a driving or on a mobile device or something. One thing, if you go back to rewatch this or have access at the moment, you'll see that there's a QR code on the lower portion of the slide deck along with a tiny URL, the ogsd.cc URL. That will bring you to a copy of the slide deck with all of the hyperlinks clickable, so that if there is any link or resource that you're trying to access, it will bring you to an easy way to get to those. Some of the questions that were coming up would be ones like asking about which test my child will be taking. So in summary, students in grades 3 through 8 will be taking the CASP tests, whether they take specific instances of those tests depending on their grade level, or if they're in a dual language program, then they may be taking additional tests, or you'll see as we keep going, there'll be some drop downs and samples of what to see. But for specific information, your child's teacher will be able to clarify the exact tests that your student or child will be taking. Also, the casp.org website, caaspp.org, will bring you to another page with a lot of other resources that could help for questions like that.
Great. I did see one question, is it like iReady testing? There are similarities in regards to the adaptive capacity of questions are being asked. Students are asked questions starting near their grade level, and then it moves up and down based on how they answer previous questions, and then you get a report that gives where they're at. We intentionally use iReady because it is a pretty good predictor on how students would perform on the state test. So that's how that would go. Yeah, we're going to show you in a slide a little bit later there, show us how to use the link to practice at home. That will be coming up soon. Thanks. That's an excellent question. So I'll go ahead and move on a little bit. In fact, in a couple slides, we'll be diving into it.
Yeah. So with this slide, this kind of talks about ways that students can practice or be trained for this. If you look at this particular chart that we have displayed right now, the ones in orange and yellow, or sorry, orange and red, those are ones that would be happening at the school. So it's not something that parents can do with their students at home. So that's, just be aware of that, and don't be looking there for stuff that you can help your child with. Those are things that teachers have been doing over the last few months in order to prepare the students for the test. But what you as parents can do is the green portion, which is the practice tests that are available online from the state. And these are grade level specific. They're summative. The answers are not recorded or scored or reported on or anything like that. They're simply there for you and your child to practice getting into the test, kind of seeing what the layout of some of the questions look like. So that way they're not surprised when they go in and use some of those things. For the math ones in particular, there are some special tools that are provided in the testing that in the practice test, the students can actually see what tools there are and be able to utilize some of those. So they're not trying to learn that during the test itself. It doesn't require the secure browser, but we do suggest that parents and students use the district provided Chromebooks to access the secure browser to take this portion, to take the practice tests, mostly because that's what they're going to be doing when they actually take the tests in the classroom. So if they practice that at home, then they can learn more about how that's going to look or what that's going to act like when they're actually in the classroom. The key thing to that is that they'll be signing in with a guest login, and we'll be showing you that as well. The guest login basically means you don't need a special code that the teacher would be giving the students during the class. You can flip that off and then show the kids like, this is what it would be asking you if you were in the classroom. So pay attention to that, right? Don't, try and the teachers will be telling them this as well, but make sure they're not using the guess mode when they're actually taking the test, because that's going to cause a lot of problems and delays in taking the test. But at home, you can definitely use the guess mode to just see how this thing works.
Great.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to switch over to present on a separate computer in just a second. But before I do so, I want to bring to your attention that there is the Starting Smarter website from CASP, and it allows families to get some different perspectives of what is available to them pre and post test. So bear with me for 1 second while I transition over to another screen.
And while Sergio is getting there, again, what he's showing you here is just some resources to kind of help you out. What I'll be getting into after this was the actual practice test that Mr. Herman had just mentioned.
Great. So hopefully, perfect. Hopefully you're able to see the screen I'm sharing here. So this is the live website of the Starting Smarter. This is going to allow me to demonstrate and clicking through some of the functionality of the website for you guys to see. As you notice on the very top, it gives me a quick way just to switch into Spanish translation for the site. But if you're looking for other translations, using Google Translate to translate your website will help if you're having difficulty with the content. So with the Starting Smarter site, one of the first resources it gives you is a resource that shows you how to understand the score and report areas once the test is taken. Or if your child took the test in previous years, they would have received the score report, which looks very similar to this. For example, this being the English Language Arts one, it gives some information about the student and then what the level was from 1 to 4. And then the intention of this is not only to provide you with information on how your child scored on the test, but to give some information to you to better help when you meet with the teacher in the fall for the next grade level to identify some strengths and some things that you may want to focus on during the school year. So that's a sample of what the reporting can look like for each of the tests and each of the performance areas. Once they click on this, you can see what the different performing areas are in that particular test. So for language arts in this example, listening, reading, research, and writing were the performance areas. And then once again, if you went into math, you would see that there are different performance areas as well. And this should be something that you probably are recognizing some of the terms here, because these are most likely things that are being communicated during goal setting meetings or on report cards or progress reports that get sent home. Below that, you'll see that there are some test questions, some sample questions. Now, this is not the same as the practice test. This is just to get an idea of what type of questions will be inside of each of the categories. So, for example, if your child was to take the ELA test in 4th grade, addressing the reading area, and we submit, we're going to be brought to a site here that has some sample information here. So here's a sample test question. They can read the passage. You can expand to read the entire passage. And then once that's done, you can see the optional or the options for the answers. And then you can even do this as a family, right? I think it's A, I think it's C. What do you think? And then you can go ahead and see what the correct answer was. And then it will show you what the correct answer is. So that's just a sample, not that it's going to put you into a practice test scenario, but just an example of what the questions would look like. And then you can pivot around to different subject matter. If your child is a 5th grader or an 8th grader, you'll notice that when I collect science, I only have in our district between 5th grade and 8th grade as an option, right? So I can then click 5th grade, and then we can say if it's going to be physical life or earth science, dive into there, and then see what some sample test questions are. I haven't done this multiple times to know if it's going to randomize and give you the same question over and over again when you select these grade levels, but it will at least give you an idea of what kind of things to expect to see, different ways of reading charts, matrices, how they may have to put multiple answers in on one question, and not just have one answer, but maybe a variety of answers to fill in a chart. But it does give you a pretty good idea of what type of questions to expect. And so that is back on the Starting Smarter site. And then the last thing on the bottom is additional resources, one of which Bruce will be diving into in a second, and that is the practice test. And just like Steve mentioned, you can take the practice test in a web browser like Firefox, Chrome, or Safari, or as recommended, using the Secure Test browser. The Secure Test browser will come to a slide in a couple minutes that will show you how the students access that on their Chromebook. And the intention is it's a secure way for them to access the test without giving them any additional resources or the ability to open another tab in a browser to search for the answer. It is a controlled environment that way, that when they take the real test, that is the required and only way they can take the test. So it is a good idea to practice in that environment, because if there are tools such as rulers or protractors or highlighting tools or anything like that, the way they access those tools are going to be very, 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 very representative of how they actually will be taking the test and accessing those tools. Whereas if you do it in the browser like Firefox or Chrome, those tools either won't be there or they will be in a different location. So
and we had a question,
Yeah.
Mr. Rizzi, from a parent that is this, and I'm guessing this is the samples, is this open to parents at this point? It seems that it doesn't provide the samples when following the steps you did. It complains about, please select item in the list. Can you kind of?
So I actually, it is open to the public. I'm accessing this without signing in, but the error message that you are receiving, I actually had received on my computer prior to this meeting. I had to go up to the top of my browser, and I'll do it right here. I had to go up here and I had to clear the cookies and site settings. And when I did that, it was able to allow me to view the drop downs, because I know the drop downs were giving some errors. So that's the exact same error I was receiving. I would suggest doing the process I just did, like clearing cache of cookies on that site settings. And if that doesn't work, maybe try a different browser or use incognito mode, which is clicking on the 3 dots and then going to an incognito window and pasting in the ca.startingsmarter.org. Hopefully that helps, but it does not have to do with you not having any sort of credentials or login rights.
Thanks. That's perfect. I think that helped them out.
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll go ahead and move on to the next part of the presentation here. Sergio stops sharing his screen, and I'll be sharing mine in a moment. Yeah, does the crazy loop thing. Yeah, so on the next portion, I'm not sure if Mr. Harmon wants to bring the deck back up so we can get a reference point on what we're discussing here, and then I'll dive into the presentation. But practice tests are available. As Mr. Rizzi said, you can do this online, and strongly encourage using the student's Chromebook, because again, we want to replicate as much as we can kind of how they're going to be experiencing in class. So if for some reason there's something not working on the Chromebook, doing the practice test to find that out now is going to be a lot less stressful for the poor teacher who's trying to figure out that maybe a certain key they didn't realize they needed is not working. So highly encourage you guys to at least turn it on and spend a little bit of time, make sure it works. Best way to do that, again, as you can see on the slide deck here, when they open up the Chromebook, the most important thing to remember is they're not putting in their password to sign in, because that's what they're just so used to doing. They open up the lid, there's their picture on there, and they just start typing away. They hit enter and it opens up the browser. This test is designed, the practice test as well as the state test, to be in a secure space where somebody cannot open up another tab to access any resources outside of the test during the test session. So again, strongly encourage that. And to do so, they just click on the apps, as you can see in the little screenshot there, and they click on Secure Test Browser, and it will bring them to something which I'll be sharing, kind of sort of not exactly like this. I'm roundabouting it because obviously I can't be in a secure browser and also be on this Google Meet. If you did go online and click on that link, then you would be able to see something that looks like this here. And it'll bring you to this page. What you're most interested in is the one that's on the right-hand side. If you're a student, to access, or parent assisting your kiddo, to access the practice test. So again, on that link that's in the presentation slide deck, if you get lost, if you just do a simple Google search for California practice test, that'll probably work. If you can't even remember CASP, you'll find this. Once you go here, hopefully this is going to bring me to the right location. I'm going to have to probably share my other tab. Sorry, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. That should bring us to the right one. Share this tab instead. Did it go? It didn't. Hang on. I'm going to stop sharing this and reshare, because when I switched to the tab, it didn't let me do it. I apologize. Let me, oh wait, yeah, no, now it doesn't want me to share my screen. All right. Bear with me. You know, working in tech is always fun as you run into problems. Okay, so let me try to come back in here. Mr. Herman, let me just see if I can go about it this way. Go with the window, share now, and let's go with beat this one. Again, sorry about this. Share and practice test. Maybe that will help. Let's see if this will There we go. Sorry, not as clean as the other way. I got a bunch of other tabs that are open. I apologize for that, but I want to, for the sake of time, get us through it. So this is where you should be directed to when you actually click on that practice test link. And you will be able to, this is where you have options. Mr. Harmon had suggested you do want to keep it as guest, because if you toggle this, it's going to start asking you for things that you probably don't know, which is the SSID. That is a secure session ID, and only the teachers will have access to this, and they won't be providing it. And to be honest with you, you won't really need that. So just leave everything as guest and just simply click sign in at the bottom. And then when you do this, it will ask you to select the grade. I'm going to pick fourth. It's the top fourth. It's my favorite. I'm going to go with that. And then you will see some options here. So you see practice test. This is where you kind of want to hang out, is right here in the practice test area. This will be your two content areas. You have the ELA and the math. And then it says practice test. These are those multiple choice questions that I referred to that are adaptive and kind of move up and down based on your answers. Practice test won't do that for you necessarily, so don't count on that working that way. And then the performance task. These are those few questions where you're going to read a few articles, do maybe an essay, it might be a narrative, informational writing, or an opinion writing. That's your performance tasks. Traditionally, this one is more difficult for students to try and grasp, so you might want to show them what that means and to be patient with those. I'm going to go to the practice test really quick first, show you some other things that you may have to choose. When you come into this, it's going to ask, if you need to turn on certain features, is it going to be presented in different language or sign language? For the most part, you probably want to keep these as a default. And the reason for this is if there's any accommodations that need to be made, especially if your student is in special education, the teachers in the sites will be putting those accommodations into the testing environment for them. And that will allow, so if they're practicing with certain things, and then the kid maybe like a text-to-speech option, if that is not an accommodation, then that won't work on their test. So you want to replicate what they will be able to do actually in the when they're actually sitting down doing that. So I just generally try to go in the habit of just keeping it as the defaults here, and I just simply go select.
And one other addition to that is that if your child does require accommodations, that should have already been discussed during the IEP meeting or the 504 meeting. So that would already be something that you would have handled a while ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very important.
And if you can't remember what those are, contact your teacher and they could probably guide you through that.
Exactly. And it'll then ask you for a sound check. It won't let you pass until you do it. And then hopefully I'm hearing something. Mine's on mute, so it's fine. I say, yep, I can hear the sound. That's great. And then you want to review it. Nope, or the help guide. Help guide, I would suggest you probably take a peek at this because it helps you understand how the tools work. But I won't do this exactly at this moment. And then you begin the test. So I'm just going to point out a few things and kind of just zip through a few questions to get you a feel for what you might experience when doing this. Loads up the page content. And it simply asks a question. Some of the things I want you to notice that are here is you have a progress bar at the top left-hand corner, which will fill up as they proceed. There's a save. So if students remind your kiddos like, hey, something's going on, you're taking a break, make sure that you hit the save button. It does know to save it, but as with anything else, don't trust it, save it. And then next is how you proceed to the next question. You'll notice that when I click this, it's going to say, hey, you need to answer the question before you can proceed. So you don't get to preview and go back and forth. There's kind of a strategy where you can do this, but it takes a very important conversation with the child to understand. When I'm a teacher, I always explain, because it won't let you go unless you pick something, but you can put something in there and then mark it for review. So for example, on another tools on the right over here, you can zoom in on the question if you need to get it your screen larger, or you can zoom out, and then you have what's called a line reader to help them focus where they're at in reading it. Because some of it's called masking, where you can help focus on certain parts of the questions. Other features over here to the right, you'll see mark for review. This is how you would want to flag it. Like, hey, I'm kind of struggling with that. I'm not sure. I'm going to take my best guess, but if I have time, I'm going to go back. So again, kind of teach them, like, you want to answer every question, because it is, for the most part, you want to give it a shot, or it won't even let you proceed. So you mark it for review, and then that'll flag it in the system. You want to go back. And then there's a notepad. This is a virtual scratch paper. All the students will be provided with scratch paper and pencils to write with, so they need to do that. But anything they do will need to be turned in with the test. They can't bring that stuff home. So this is a virtual way of doing that. So it just comes through and asks questions. I'm just going to try and do this quick. So let's see, was that 3? Was that 2? I think it's 4:23, I believe. Could be wrong. Or I can't even type right. So I made a mistake. Let's do that right. I think it's 4:23. Now I have an answer in there, and you notice right here, I have marked it, and I'm going to go to my next question. And then it begins to ask about strategies about fractions. It's all 4th grade. They may ask you like, hey, we added this up. I don't want to spend too much time on answering a bunch of questions here. But again, if they're stuck and they want to move on, they should pick an option, mark it for review, and then go to the next question. And you'll see the bars filling up at the top. Okay. I believe this practice test, I think, has about 20 questions. I'm not certain. But basically, this is your interface. As you go through, I'm just going to put in a couple numbers. So I want to try and see if I can get to a place where there's some tools. You got your skip counting. I'm just going to randomly pick one real quick here. So I'm not sure if the practice test actually gets us. I'm trying to show you an example of an interactive tool. Probably had to pick a different. I think, yeah, for these, you have to pick all of them. So sometimes they will have multiple questions within one. And for those of you that are really fast at math, and I'm messing this up, I'm not even actually reading the question. This is not what you want your kids to do, by the way, right? Take their time, read it, take notes. I'm just attempting to get to it. And you know what? I'm not sure that I'm going to get to one. So I think you're just going to have to trust me on this, because I don't want to spend too much time on this. But I think the most important thing that you guys want to gather is how did I get into this space, which is that link. Or you could do just a very quick Google search on CASP practice test. I'll take you directly to the page I just showed you. Click on the parent link in the bottom right, answer a few quick questions, and then go from there. I'm going to pause for a quick second. I did see that Sana had said, can you please guide me about scoring 2, as it's difficult for me to understand. So scoring in regards to So basically, like, obviously, like with this multiple choice, there's going to be one correct answer. If the students do not select the correct answer, it will be adaptive. It will give them the next question not quite as, maybe it's instead of being fourth grade second month, maybe it goes down to fourth grade beginning of the year, or maybe third grade 10th month. And then it kind of starts to settle in to see where their strengths and weaknesses lie. So that's part of how the adaptive tests work. When you get the scores, I think that Mr. Rizzi, that Parent Resources, I forget what the site was called, that's an excellent way to look at that. It will give you exactly kind of like what those 1, 2, 3, 4s mean and things of that nature. What happens at the end of the test, if I get to the very end of the practice test, it will not score it for you. It's not going to give you the results of how you did. The purpose of the way I would approach the practice test as a parent would be more to get them familiar with what it looks like. Like, what is this thing? How am I going to use my Chromebook to type in that answer of a 2-digit number? Oh, I made a mistake. I need to go back. Or do I create a space? Or how do I do a fraction, right? So you notice the cursor's up at the top, and maybe that I need to be able to know how to. Now, how do I get to the bottom? I'm not sure. These are the types of things I would do, because if they're stuck, and they know it's 5 1/4, not that that's correct, but if they know that, but they don't know how to enter it in, that's where I would spend a lot of time practicing and making sure they could do that. And again, I want to save as I go. Let's see, I think Steve answered a question there. I think we might be okay with some questions. And I don't mind pausing for a quick moment. If we might be able to turn on, you could either put it in chat. Is there only one test for each type, it says. For each type, if I can get clarification, and maybe we could turn on, if you're willing to unmute and ask the question, if that's easier for you to do so. Miriam, I am perfectly comfortable. Just note it will be recorded. Otherwise, the question was, is there only one test for each type? The time duration for state testing, Christopher, is the amount of time the students need, generally speaking. There's allotments of time. Typically, I believe it's about, don't quote me on this, they give like, on average, in the classroom, you're probably, for the math component, multiple choice aspect. If I recall, when I did this, I did it over the course of, Mr. Rizzi, I don't remember, was it 4 days? This was 12 years ago that I last did and that was back when it was
about right. That sounds about right. I remember that. And then typically each
TLA was about 4 more days. We used to break it in 2 weeks, and then the kids would go at their own pace. If I think my advice to you,
I think that the timing for it now it's still untimed, so they
that is correct.
The kids get as much time as they need.
But
the number of questions, I think, has decreased since last year.
That's also correct.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Manju has a great question. When will we know the exact date of the test? You will be receiving specific communication from your specific school via the normal channels, either Parent Square and or probably both, a written communication in the weekly envelope that they will say exactly when this is happening. So that will be coming from the school sites, because I can't speak exactly towards the individual schools. Generally speaking, in my experience, has been doing this for 21 years, it tends to be about starting 1 week after we return from spring break, because you want to get past spring break, take a breather to get back into the routines, and then go. So that's where I would mentally frame it. But you can always just call your school. They should know today. You can probably call them and they tell you tomorrow. Okay. So I think that if it's okay, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, because I don't know if it's that beneficial. I don't know if I could. Yeah, I'm kind of running out of time, and we have a little bit more to go over. But the most important thing is how to get there. Sit down with a kiddo and just explain the importance of taking their time. And if they're not sure, mark a choice, mark it for review later, go back to that. Okay, and just don't rush. Practice step. Yeah, it was showing 1 of 99. I think that there are 99 questions in the bank of questions, but as you can see, I raced through approximately, I'm not sure what question I was on. I'm at 29%. I'd be surprised, and I'm on question 9. So by that standard, 30% of 10, that should be what, 30 questions, I think. So yeah, so yep. Is this different from gate testing? The way you access the test and the test itself is certainly different. Gate testing was just done, I believe, in this past week or so. The style of the gate test, which is provided to all third graders and incoming fourth graders if they didn't receive it, it's a completely different style of test in regards to that. That's called a Raven. And those questions, when I was experiencing with that many years ago, it's much more abstract. Are there any test practice? Another excellent question. Are there any practice tests at school? I did it a lot. I'll speak towards my practice. When I did it, I spent a good week just going through. When it started doing the computer, I got the kids on there. They did very similar to what you're seeing now, but the only difference is they add that piece where they actually have the kiddo login using the actual student, a secure student ID, because they need to practice. They get their little cards with their name, and that's what the teachers do so that now the teachers can visually see the students. So it's practice not only for the students on how to log in and access it correctly, but also for the teachers themselves to make sure that everything's working correctly. So we as teachers also like to do that. Is there an option to save the test per session and retake it later? I'm not sure with the practice test. Since you're logged in as a guest, it is not going to retain any of that data. So you will not be able to save and come back. You could probably, I don't think it's going to time you out. So the reason why they put the save function here is, again, to simulate what it would be like in the real world. They would be saving it and coming back. It does auto save when you proceed to the next question. But if I'm on this question and it's taking me a long time to answer it, and I go out to recess and don't save it, there's a good chance. This is very important to do this with the what's the other, not the multiple choice.
Performance task.
There we go. Performance task. Remind them, because they may be putting things down. Like if I went over here in my little notebook and I started taking notes about some stuff here, and I don't save it and close it, if it times out, all those little notes that I took when I come back from recess may not be there. So definitely good practices to save. Okay, I think we're going to leave it at this. Stop presenting here. We'll jump back into the presentation, get through that. We just have another 1 or 2 slides, and then we'll open it up for a few questions for the wrap it up for the last 5 minutes.
Okay, and this was just as a reminder of some of the pieces that are available. The practice test is something that the parents can do with their students at home. The training tests and the interim assessments are things that the teachers could be doing as well. The training test is basically to train the kids, like Bruce was talking about, getting them used to the environment, things like that. The interim assessments are things that they could have been giving throughout the year. And that basically is a tool that is similar to the SBAC, but it allows teachers to kind of get a sense of where the students are so that they can, teach the children according to state standards. Okay, and I think we did this one.
Mm-hmm.
And this slide shows basically if you open up the Chromebook and you don't see that apps part right down at the bottom there, then the reason for that is probably because the student is still signed in. Most likely in that same location on the bottom left, there'll be a sign out of Chromebook or sign out of account or something along those lines. So if they click that, as soon as the screen refreshes after they've clicked that, you should see that apps button show up. If you see things like the shutdown show up and not the apps button, then you definitely need to get let the teacher know so that we can figure out what's going on and possibly replace that Chromebook or get it repaired. So yeah, that is hopefully going to be helpful when you're trying to access this. And this is also why we suggest that you start practicing now, trying to do that so that you can see if those things are actually functional.
Great.
One of the things that you also should be thinking about is there's things other than actually practicing the test, right? if you want the students to do their best on the test, then there are things that you can do at home that will help for that. What we've been doing tonight is talking a lot about what the item types are and what to expect on the test and the practice tests, so that they can become more familiar with that environment, because it's not going to be anything like anything that they've done before. It's not exactly like the iReady tests. It's not like other online tools that they have either. Other things that you can do are more physical. So for example, the night before, make sure that the student's Chromebook is fully charged, plug it in, have it charge overnight, make sure that's functioning correctly in the week before they start testing, and make sure that the keys are working, make sure the trackpad is working, things along those lines. And if it's not, then have that, let the school know and let the teacher know, so that they can get that taken care of as soon as possible. Other things you can do is to encourage the students. Students, as we know, they respond to encouragement, and so it's a good way to help them to feel confident about going in and taking the tests. Because if they're not confident in taking the test, then they might not perform well. And I wouldn't, it's not a matter of like trying to give them worst case scenarios or anything like that, but rather it's just encouraging them to just do the best that they can. And that they've been studying in school for the last year, and so they are going, they're prepared for this test, and they just need to go and show what they know, and that will help with their performance on that test. Also know your child's testing schedule, so you know when testing starts. Again, like Bruce mentioned, that will come through Parent Square or other communication methods that your school has. They should already have that information available if they haven't sent it out to parents yet. But they have been planning for that, so they're ready for that. Most of the schools, I think all of the schools actually, are starting testing after spring break, whether it's the second week after or whenever. It'll be sometime around that time. And then the night before the test, make sure that they get a good night's sleep, make sure that they eat a healthy breakfast, and make sure they get some light exercise even that morning. That can sometimes be helpful to get that blood flowing, so that they feel a little bit more awake and aware of what's going on. And lastly, so we are Bruce, Steve, and Sergio. And if you have any questions, you can follow us. You can follow up questions. You can email us at the email that's there. You can also ask your teacher or your principal about specific things as well, if there's things that you need to follow up with those things. And then